Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Halifax.
That's me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When we're looking at legislation here in the House and we're talking about our thoughts or what we're hearing or ideas we have about legislation, there's really no better way to look at legislation than through the lens of our work as a Member of Parliament, because we have a lot of opportunities as MPs to talk to people, to hear different things. We meet with experts, people who have studied different issues, done that kind of academic work on things, but we're also talking to frontline workers, people who experience the front lines of issues and have good feedback to give us about potential impacts of legislation. And we also have the experience of talking to people in community, and people in community who will actually be where they'll actually feel the impacts of potential legislation and have to live with the impacts of our legislative decisions. So that's some of the work that we do as MPs that gives us a unique perspective. Another thing that we do as MPs is we have caseworkers working in our office. A lot of us do. And our caseworkers are there to help people navigate through federal government, get people information about files or where their file on a particular issue is at. I will say this has been a long-standing thing where many of us as MPs have caseworkers. I would say that our caseworkers are doing more and more of this casework since the Conservatives have started whittling away the basic services that people need to understand the federal government, whether it's applying for employment insurance or a veteran applying for services or someone asking for information about permanent residency or even their student loans. They're confronted with this 1-800 number and voicemail or just waiting on hold forever, and it's really hard for them to talk to a real person. So we do have caseworkers, many of us in our offices, to help folks navigate these systems. And in my office in Halifax, we have seen over the past 6 years a growing wait list for citizenship. Now, Phyllis Larson is the gal in my office who does casework, and she is fantastic at it. I've actually had a lot of assumptions made about the kind of casework that she must do. People think, oh, well, it's the East Coast. Bet you it's a lot of EI applications or working with Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Well, actually, the #1 issue in my office is immigration. And every day that Phyllis works in my community office on Gottingen Street, she sees new residents to Halifax who want to become Canadian citizens. And these are people from all walks of life. We have university professors, we have truck drivers, we have families working to get the rest of their family over to Canada, so family reunification, and we have families looking to adopt children from other countries. It's a whole range of different situations. And it takes a lot of courage, a lot of bravery, and sometimes even desperation to come here. But lately, it takes more skill, more tenacity, and more patience to become a citizen of this country. So Phyllis used to work for my predecessor, Alexa McDonough, and she's been doing this kind of work for a long time. And it wasn't that long ago that Phyllis saw routine citizenship applications move through the system in about a year. Now today, thanks to this government, the average processing time on a routine application is about 23 months. And that's routine. That's not all the strange things that can happen, like someone coming from Ethiopia and their birth certificate is in the Ethiopian calendar, so the ages don't match up. And we've seen all kinds of non-routine applications, I can certainly tell you that. And keep in mind that this application, the option to apply only comes after 3 years of permanent residency. And even worse is somebody who is given a residency questionnaire, an RQ. This is a questionnaire that will automatically increase your processing time from 23 months to 37 months. And the frequency of these residency questionnaires, the frequency with which they're being given out, is alarming. People who sometimes can't afford bus fare are now being asked to supply everything from pay stubs to tax returns to airline tickets to prove that they meet the residency requirements. It doesn't make sense to do this, but government is continuing to add this extra layer of bureaucracy to an already lengthy process, a process that is fearful for a lot of people and uncertain for everyone. And so it's no surprise that these constituents, these individuals and families are angry and they're frustrated, and sometimes they feel like giving up hope. They pay their taxes, they study, they work, they do all the things that Canadian citizens are expected to do, but yet they are still not offered the full rights and benefits of Canadian citizenship. New Canadians build strong communities, healthier families, and this is key to creating a strong and proud Canada, but it's becoming harder and harder to do so. We're seeing wait times so long that medical and fingerprint tests are expiring. So this forces people to resubmit their application, which means increased costs for them, but often it means long, perilous journeys to actually obtain these documents. Now, I know that this isn't really an issue addressed by the bill, but we have had reports in my riding as well, especially from the universities, that there is a systematic denial of visas for international students who come from eastern and southern parts of Africa. There's no accountability when it comes to those missions abroad and how they process visas and why they're denying visas, and oftentimes we're hearing reports that applicants are refused before their applications are even viewed. So it's broader than the citizenship piece. It goes to a lot of different things that the Office of Immigration is dealing with. But we get these kinds of stories from our constituents, and I wanted to share a story with you from a recent case that we were working on. And we have a case that unfortunately isn't unique, where a family's gone missing. So a mother is here in Canada. She's trying to bring her children to Canada under the one-year window program. In December of 2013, she traveled to her home country in Africa to see her children at the last known address where she knew they were staying. They were being cared for by friends. And on her arrival, she discovered that the children had been taken to an orphanage in the capital city. She went to that orphanage, but she couldn't find her children. CIC waitlists are so long that this woman waited for her children's file to be processed, and in the meantime, they've gone missing, and she can't find her family. Can you imagine what it would be like if your family, if your children went missing while you were waiting for paperwork to be processed? This woman is trying to reunite her family, and it's our system that has resulted in her not knowing if she's ever going to see her kids again. During her time there, someone actually went through her personal belongings, and the only thing that was taken were pictures of her children. 2 minutes. My gosh. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'm running out of time. I really was hoping that the minister would commit to working with us to bring real improvements to citizenship laws, especially when it comes to this backlog. So I've concentrated on some issues that haven't been fixed in this bill. I don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to talk about what is in this bill and a problem I have with this bill, and that is the ability to revoke citizenship. I believe that this bill creates 2 tiers of citizen in this country, and it's a reprehensible act that a government would do that. What I hoped to do with the remainder of my time, Mr. Speaker, was to actually read from a brief by CARL, the Canadian Association of Refugee Lawyers, because as you've heard from some other of my colleagues, this bill has not been studied in committee. There was a motion tabled by the Conservatives to study the purpose of the bill, but the bill itself has not been studied. No report on the subject matter of the bill has been tabled. And so I have in my hands a copy of a brief that CARL, the Association of Refugee Lawyers, put together. And these folks are the experts, not just legal experts, but they're working on the front lines. They know what it's like, this immigration process. And they have done a fantastic job of pointing out some of the key problems, especially around the ability to revoke citizenship, the fear that it creates. There's one line I'll read because with my time. They call it a way to foster a citizenship of fear. I highly recommend that anybody who's interested in this read the brief by Carl. The Canadian Bar Association and BC Civil Liberties Association have done excellent work on this too, and they're giving us the advice. They're telling us this bill is not constitutional. They're telling us it's creating a citizenship of fear. They're saying that this is not the way forward when it comes to reforming our immigration law, and I will leave it at that and look forward to questions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Pickering, Scarborough East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I was listening with great attention the presentation of my colleague opposite. However, I have a question. You know, I am first generation of immigrant in this country, and I defended this country in Afghanistan and so on. So I have a small question to the member opposite. Is the member opposite standing here and defending those who engaged in armed conflict against our own country? So you were speaking about the civil liberties and so on, that they are so nice to the people, and they are so concerned about the people. You know that this legislation is not in line with let's see the issues giving citizenship for everybody maybe, or so I'm asking the member opposite how she's thinking about that people who is engaged in conflict against our own country should get the citizenship or should not be revoked the citizenship.
For Halifax.
Well, I can tell that the member has been handed his marching orders in terms of what question to ask me, because he talked about how I talked about civil liberties and all these fantastic things, when actually I didn't. I was talking about something else entirely, but he's got his cue card in front of him and he asked me questions, so I will answer it. I think that if you are a citizen of Canada, you are a citizen of Canada. There should not be two tiers of citizenship. I too I'm the first generation born in Canada in my family, the child of an immigrant family, and we're Canadian. It's not conditional Canadian. With this bill, for example, if the minister thinks that there's fraud, on a balance of probabilities, he or she can revoke citizenship. So that's the minister saying, yeah, probably. So yeah, I'm going to take your citizenship away. Absolutely not. The test should not be, yeah, probably. The test, what it means is that citizens of this country do not have due process. They do not have due process, and I think that is something that we need to stand up against.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Mr. Speaker, I do appreciate the comments that the member has made, especially when she highlighted an area that's caused a great deal of frustration for myself as a local member of Parliament that, like her, deals considerably in issues like immigration and citizenship. The processing times have increased significantly. In fact, it's closer to just over let's say 2.5 years. And that's how long it takes, Mr. Speaker, for someone that qualifies today, meets the criteria, and says, look, I now want to be able to have my citizenship, and puts in their application. They can anticipate waiting a minimum 28 months. Now, government comes in, they created this crisis. Now they come in and they say, well, we have this wonderful piece of legislation, and the purpose of the legislation, in part, is to reduce the waiting times for processing of citizenship. My question for the member is, does she believe that it's because of this legislation that it's going to cause the waiting times to go down, or does she believe that it's because the government's low priority of processing citizenships that is actually the root of the problem that we have today in terms of the unacceptable waiting times for processing citizenship?
The honourable member for Halifax.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for his question. And he posed it as a question, but in there was also his point of view, and I agree with his point of view. It was sort of implicit in the way he asked the question. I don't think that this has anything to do with money. I think it has to do with priority. I mean, don't forget that this isn't the first time that the Conservatives have promised and failed to address the backlog. the backlog of requests has doubled under their supposed leadership. And I think that it's, you know, I think there is a strategy there. I don't know that I have the psychological training to sort of peel back the layers of what that strategy is. But it doesn't seem that the citizenship system and reforms to immigration, like real reforms to actually help people get through this process and deal with the backlog, it doesn't seem that the Conservatives are taking it seriously at all. And, you know, but I will add to it, it's not just immigration, right? I mean, we're seeing the same backlog when it comes to EI. We're seeing the same backlog when it comes to veterans trying to get services. And when people call our office and they say, just, can you get me any information? Can you just tell me anything about my file? And you know, we could say, yeah, we can call this number for MPs, but it's not going to change anything. It's not going to make anything faster. And we call, and we get the news. Yeah, it's being processed. And that's the best we can do.
Resume.